Right, so this is a draft video rather than an actual video. But at the moment, Matt Lucas is trending. I say this is a draft video, it depends. Do I put this up? It's a mess, I don't know. So Matt Lucas is trending on Twitter, and I try not to get like drawn into Twitter stuff too much because it's too depressing, and you know, Twitter isn't necessarily like the real world, you know, there's a world outside of Twitter. But the man is trending and I have beef with the man, and do you know what? I think I wouldn't have beef with him if he was the sort of person that had like, you know the thing with Matt, if you don't know, shall I explain? Okay, that's probably wise. So Matt Lucas and David Walliams rose to prominence here in the UK because they did a show called Little Britain, which was very popular at the time. I remember when I was younger, kids at school would like be quoting it all the time, and looking back, it is just so racist and ableist and transphobic, and I actually can't think, it's so bad that I actually can't think of a single sketch that isn't offensive, that doesn't rely on some sort of offensive stereotype. Like, it's that bad. There is no comedy in that show without the offence. So anyway, he did that, and there was some criticism at the time. Like I say, I was like pretty young then, but especially looking back, like there's a lot of people who were older who've said like there was criticism at the time. Okay, fair enough. Somehow that got through on the BBC, and these two white comedians somehow managed to do that. Okay. And maybe they didn't know for real. Like, I can kind of understand, like, for one show. I mean, I'm being extremely generous, but especially because these guys are like, Matt Lucas himself was like 36, I think, like in his 30s. And you can understand people doing things which are misguided when they're young. A lot of people who apologise for stuff are people who did stupid things when they were teenagers or early 20s kind of thing. And you can kind of understand that because these people weren't posted on the BBC or something, you know, they'd just like be doing things on like their channels. You often get that kind of thing with YouTubers because, you know, when people are young they make mistakes, they absorb stuff from society, fair enough. Like I'm the sort of person who's very for those sort of apologies because, you know, those people often are just grown up in environments where they're not exposed to anti-racism and they just absorb stuff and they just regurgitate it. Anyway, I'm about forgiveness, so if someone makes a sincere apology, I always forgive them. I'm not saying anyone else has to, but my personality is that if someone does something wrong and they apologise and they really mean it and they show that they've changed, then I usually forgive them. I mean, except in like extreme cases, but usually I do. So Little Britain was like extremely popular. It was like this huge cultural thing here in the UK. And yeah, David Walliams and Matt Lucas became very famous from it. Then later in 2010, so bear in mind this is after there had been criticism, and bear in mind they're in their 30s, so they're like fully grown men, they made a show called Come Fly With Me, which used the same stuff. It used blackface. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the pictures of Matt Lucas completely blacked up, pretending to be a black woman called Precious. Yeah, it's really offensive. A lot of that was very offensive. And if you say that, a lot of people say, oh, you're being such a snowflake. But I just don't think that if you're an actually good comedian and if you're smart, like, you don't need to be like a 21st century minstrel show, you know what I mean? Like, most people have like the intellect to get past that. If you can't make people laugh without that, I mean, first of all, if you're trying to make people laugh with that, I mean, why? That's dodgy. But, you know, good comedians shouldn't have to rely on those sort of tropes, like, especially not in 2010, and that's the thing, it's because it was 2010, they'd already done the first offensive show, they did the next one, criticism was drowned out. Like, I know that Matt Lucas was blocking people that tried to engage with him on the blackface and say, you know, like, that's really offensive, don't, and that's not even to begin on Little Britain, like the harm that it did to, I mean, there was a sketch about like a working class girl, you probably know Vicky Pollard, and it was the stereotype, like she's a stereotypical chav is what we would call it in the UK, which is a really offensive term, by the way, that people often use for working class people, which is just really bad. There was the Thai bride stereotype, and they pretended to play someone with a disability, and a carer who was, the disabled person was like, not only did they pretend to be that disabled person, they also, the joke was that disabled person was just pretending to be disabled to like get perks as well, so that was bad. There was this one sketch, the famous I'm a Lady sketch, in which these Walliams and Lucas played women, or I don't know if they're supposed to be men dressed as women. I don't know what the whole idea of that sketch was, and looking back it's even worse. And the whole point is that they say they're ladies and then they suddenly have like gruff voices or something, so it's like a really transphobic trope. Anyway, all that stuff was really, really bad. And it's an issue, like, you know, these things are not good. So when Black Lives Matter happened recently, there's been a lot of people sort of coming forward and apologising for stuff. So, for example, Ant and Dec before dressed up as, I don't know if they were supposed to be like, I think it was Japanese schoolgirls or something for one of their sketches on Saturday Night Takeaway. So before they were asked to, they put that out there. They said they were really sorry for it. They wanted to draw attention to it, I think, before anyone else did, and just say, look, we wouldn't do that again. That was really bad. Okay, so people were waiting and thinking about like Matt Lucas and David Walliams, because I think if they'd kind of made their fortune on that and then disappeared, I don't think it'd be such an issue. But they're both still like hugely successful in Britain through, I mean, essentially they made their money and their careers as white men making fun of minorities, you know, and stirring up that hatred. And even if they didn't mean hate themselves, they emboldened a lot of hate, because, I mean, when I was at school, people used to quote it and those horrible things, and, you know, teenagers aren't necessarily going to understand the irony if it was supposed to be ironic. So Matt Lucas was in Doctor Who as Nardole, and I've tried not to talk about Matt Lucas too much, because, you know, I make Doctor Who reviews, and I used to be on Doctor Who Time Team and all that kind of stuff. And I think part of the issue why I'm not on Time Team anymore is because I talk too much about stuff like that. And, you know, they kind of want people to be like, this show's so great and everyone on it's great. And it's like, I can't, like, you couldn't pay me any amount of money to not speak my mind. I can't do it. It's physically impossible, which might, I don't know, is that a flaw in me? Is that a good thing? I don't know. All I know is I can't do it. But yeah, so Matt Lucas was like Nardole in Doctor Who. And, I mean, that's a bit odd anyway, because it seems to be that the BBC... I mean, again, like, I'm probably cutting off opportunities just by saying this, but I can't not say it. I want to be a soap writer or write for TV. But the BBC at the moment does seem to be a strange sort of club where once you're in the gang of, like, actors and writers and stuff, it just sort of gets given out to friends, different like posts. So you'll get the same actors recycled over and over and over again. And it's also something that stops diversity, and it stops working class people, because they're not necessarily doing like open auditions. They're just a load of white male writers, often straight, are picking their actors. They're not open auditioning, and therefore you have, for example, parts like the Doctor being played over and over and over again by white people, for example. You have Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss somehow being repeatedly handed all these classics of literature to remake in the 21st century. And I don't understand why, if you're going to remake a classic that was written by a straight man, like, I know Mark Gatiss isn't straight, but like if white men are in a position of power in the Victorian era or when these things were written, and then you think, right, what should we do to make a new exciting perspective on it for the 21st century? And again, you give it to two white men who notably use a lot of sexism in their work. You just think, why? Why is that a thing? You know, I'm someone who thinks that these opportunities, I'm totally off topic now, but my brother, for example, is an actor. Dan is an actor. And, you know, he notices as well, and especially his friends, he has like quite a wide circle of friends who he studied acting with. And it is very notable that those who are middle class, who are white men, you know, conventionally attractive white men, and those that perhaps don't speak politically seem to do quite well. And, you know, it's the men of colour, the working class men that struggle more, because it is that sort of club. It's about who you're connected to. And I wish it wasn't like that. Anyway, I'm off topic, but yeah, the BBC needs to do so much better with that. Because as we know, when there's more diversity behind the screen, writing stuff, you know, it can change society. And that's why I talk about media so much, because, you know, if you have writers who stick with the status quo now, that's a whole generation, that's a wasted opportunity for taking society forward, you know? It's not that every piece of literature ever and piece of media ever needs to have a political, you know, stance necessarily, but I just feel like it's important, because if you can help the world somehow through the media you're showing and the people you choose to write it, why not do it? You know, you can make the world better. Media really affects people and changes their views in a really subtle, clever way. Anyway, again, Matt Lucas and David Walliams. So David Walliams I've had an issue with for a while, because he is on Britain's Got Talent, which is a show that I can't stand. Britain's Got Talent. It's just, I don't know how to describe it other than that it feels like a tabloid show. I don't even know how to explain the vibe. It's kind of like, we're the British public and we're auditioning to perform in the Royal Variety Show, like the honour of performing for the Queen, even though the Queen doesn't even attend and probably hates it herself. You know, here we are, like the medieval serfs and peasants, like, may we perform for the noble Queen, and it's just really awkward. And it seems like David Walliams' whole thing is acting like a predatory gay man, like, as a joke. And I don't know what his sexuality is. I mean, it's not my business what his sexuality is. And a lot of people say, you know, oh, maybe he's bi, maybe he's this. It doesn't matter what he is, you know. Good on him, whatever life he's living. But his whole career seems to be based off this hilarious joke that he secretly fancies Simon. But it's not just fancying him, it's kind of harassing him in a weird and creepy way that, let's be honest, if it was a man doing to a woman, we'd all be thinking, oh my god, that's really dodgy. And that's the joke. So, you know, he's still using his career to further the whole predatory gay trope thing, which is really dodgy. Matt Lucas was in Doctor Who. In a series where we had a black lesbian companion, and yet for some reason we needed Matt Lucas to also be the secondary companion. I don't know, maybe it's because they thought people wouldn't accept Bill and they decided to chuck him in there. I don't know. Anyway, so eventually, after the Black Lives Matter movement protests have been going for like a few days, and people have been calling for accountability in terms of like racism of high profile people in the past, people who made their careers from very public racism, he and David Walliams put out a small statement each saying that like it wasn't acceptable and that they were sorry. And, you know, okay, fair enough, but it's very late to be doing that. It's very late to be doing that because, I mean, obviously, you know, it's good that people apologise and you have to, you know, hope that it's sincere, but often, you know, you need to wait because a lot of people wouldn't have said that, and now all of a sudden, like, things are changing, their careers are on the line, so they're putting out these performative, like, I'm sorry's, but they're not actually changing. And I feel like they were in their 30s, you know, when they did this blackface and they did all this stuff. And there are better ways that they could have gone about, you know, addressing that and the harm it caused if they were really sorry about it. Again, like, people do make mistakes and people do offensive things, and, you know, I'm very forgiving towards that. People who come forward and say, I've learned differently now, I've changed, you know, I live differently, like, that's really, really good. But yeah, there's just something a little bit, like, last minute panicky about their response to that. And it's just the fact that they influence pop culture so much, you know, and I don't know why the BBC allowed it. That was really, really, really offensive and bad what they did. And they've made their fame from it. You know, so they are still benefiting from that, you know, from the blackface, from the yellow face, from all that stuff. And I'm not even saying, like, you know, they're bad people or anything, you know, I don't know them personally, but surely after something like that, you know, a huge cultural phenomenon that you've taken part in, you've written, you know, that you've created and that's caused all this trouble for minority groups, you would have a little bit of humility about you, right? Wouldn't you think? So anyway, I'm not getting into this subject too much, it's way too complicated to talk about this, and also I'm not Jewish, although I do have Jewish family. Our family actually is part Jewish because our family came over from Poland, the white side of our family. But anyway, I'm not immediately Jewish because it didn't pass through in that sense. But yeah, we have like Jewish family and stuff. But yeah, so there was a Black Lives Matter tweet, some people think was anti-Semitic, some people don't think it was. Anyway, Matt Lucas decided yesterday to retweet it and talk about how he, in fact, I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it to you just because, like, I responded, and usually I don't, but I just thought, the audacity of it. Like, I just don't understand. I don't understand these people. So he says, the individual who wrote the tweet below, he's responding to the Black Lives Matter UK account, by the way, and I should say that the Black Lives Matter, like, movement is not, like, one account, it's not by one person, it's like a huge movement, you know, there's not, like, one person in charge or writing tweets for it. But he says, the individual who wrote the tweet below does the Black Lives Matter movement and those, like myself, in brackets, who are committed to change and growth, a great disservice. And I just thought to myself, I read it a couple of times, and I thought, what do you mean the Black Lives Matter community, like, movement is doing you, like, specifically putting in brackets, like myself, dedicated to change and growth, you're doing me a disservice? And it's like, if you made your career off blackface, and it's very, very recently, like in the last few days that you've come forward and apologised for that, and you were doing that in your 30s, then how do you then come forward and act like the Black Lives Matter movement as a whole has disappointed you? as a white man. Like, I just don't understand it. Like, why does that go through people's heads? Like, why did that happen? That's such a patronising, strange thing to say. Like, it's almost like the allyship of these people is dependent on how good, you know, the oppressed person is. You know, like, oh, be good, otherwise I'll take away my support and start doing blackface again. You're not in that position to be bargaining. Like, I don't understand people like that, you know? I just, it's really bad. It's like, imagine if I had made a career, and to make it more accurate, let's say that in my 30s, I make a show which is deeply transphobic and it's rooted in transphobia, and I become famous through that. And then later, there's a movement, and somebody who is a trans rights activist tweets something that I don't like, and then I tweet them, only 2 days after my apology for transphobia, to say that they have let me down. Me, who is someone so dedicated to change and growth, and sadly they've let me down. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I mean, when I first saw it, I thought it was a joke. I thought it's like one of those parody accounts. You know how some people make parody accounts of celebrities? And then I saw it was real, and I thought, really? Really? Like, I don't know. And again, like, I'm not, you know, people talk about cancel culture, but I don't think there is cancel culture. I don't think that's a thing. I think it's accountability. And I do think that on the whole, you know, if people do, you know, apologise and they show that they've changed, you know, and that they show that and that they're willing to change and understand, then that's a really, really good thing. But I mean, it's what is it, like a week since the copy-paste apology that David Williams and Matt Lucas put out there? I don't, and you know what, it's not even about Matt Lucas necessarily, it's just, so much of this is performative, like, that people are doing, it's so performative. Their allyship is dependent on the reaction they get, like, they're going to withdraw it if they don't get a positive reaction, and that's not why you apologise, you know, that's not why you try and help. And, I don't know, I just don't understand. Essentially what I'm saying is, it's not what I came here to say, but why do people like Matt Lucas, who, I'm sorry, is extremely mediocre, how do they keep getting jobs and you know, getting rehired, and why do the BBC do this? You know, why? I'm saying it, I'm sorry, but so much of these celebrities that we have, a lot of them, you know, white male celebrities that we have, are so mediocre beyond words, and it's taking opportunities away from actual talented, diverse people who, you know, have to work so much harder to get noticed and often aren't noticed. It's just, it needs to end. And another person who's been trending recently, and I won't get into it particularly now, oh maybe I will since I'm here. I guess this is going online. There's no makeup, I haven't washed my hair, everything's a mess. But anyway, J.K. Rowling. So J.K. Rowling, I'm not going to get into too much because she's gone full TERF, so she's gone really anti-trans, and at first she got really angry online, you know, and I don't understand with J.K. Rowling, like, imagine being as rich and as powerful and as successful as J.K. Rowling, and then deciding that, like, but yet, in all my riches and happiness, I'm going to try and attack trans people online, because why? I mean, I can't imagine having that much money and that much, you know, you'd be living in luxury, wouldn't you? Like, why is that your instinct to go and do that? I'm watching her, like, destroy her own career in real time, and it's just baffling. Anyway, so she's gone full TERF, she's gone very anti-trans, and she started going on about this when there was an article about, it mentioned the phrase people who menstruate, and it was about COVID and how coronavirus has impacted those who menstruate in terms of, you know, menstrual products, menstrual health, all that kind of thing. So it was perfectly accurate that the article spoke about people who menstruate, and J.K. Rowling was angry that they didn't use the term women, but it literally was about people who menstruate. So there are trans men who menstruate, and there are cis women who don't menstruate because perhaps they've had a hysterectomy, for example. You know, there's lots of examples. So it was the correct wording anyway. You know, I don't understand why that made her so angry. And then she was on this, you know, she went off on this thing about, you know, hard-won sex-based rights, and then she wrote a blog post about which essentially made out that trans women were actually men trying to sneak into women's spaces, and oh no. And then she talked about her own assault, which I feel, you know, awful about, you know, really terrible, and she has my full sympathy with that. But to use that to imply that her assault at the hands of a cisgender man, to blame that somehow on trans women is really dangerous, and it's what people who are anti-gay did to the gay community back in the old days, isn't it? You know, it's, oh, they're bad, they're predators, they're a danger. Anyway, the Sun was really evil though, because the Sun, which otherwise known as the Scum, and that's just another thing, which randomly I'm touching on so many things here. Something that I think has gone wrong with Doctor Who, because I'm a huge Doctor Who fan, is as soon as Stephen Moffat took over, he started dealing with the Sun. And that bothered me, by the way. I just don't think that people should be dealing with the tabloids. It's time to let the tabloids die, okay? I don't care if they reach a lot of people. Like, let the tabloids die. They are just poisonous and toxic. They decided to have an interview with her abuser on the front page of their newspaper, if you can call it a newspaper, which is horrific for her. I can't believe they did that. That was evil. They say they were just trying to show how terribly bad he was. Sure. But J.K. Rowling's really, you know, she's gone off the deep end with this trans stuff. And so Emma Watson, Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint have all kind of come forward. Eddie Redmayne, and said, look, trans women are women, trans men are men. Like, please leave the marginalised people alone. They're struggling enough. What are you doing? In the most delicate way they can. And to be honest, I wish one of them would just come forward and just say, please, just JK, just shut up. You know, just be a bit ruder with her. That's what I wish, anyway. I wish one of them would just stand up and say, I mean, because they don't owe their careers to her. You know, they're grown adults. Like, I've said this before, and Dan has in videos we've done together, but I've just grown up thinking that nobody is above or below me. You know, we're all equal. Nobody is higher status, nobody is lower status. You know, you should always speak your mind to people and speak your thoughts. Because nobody is above or below you, you know. I just hate it when you see hierarchies happening all the time. I've never understood it, and I've never engaged in it. Anyway, so Stephen King, she did like this big tweet thread about, you know, how men speak over women, for example, and it was a really long tweet thread she did. And Stephen King, the famed novelist, retweeted one of her tweets about how women are often spoken over by men. So clearly I don't think he understood like the context of it all, and you know, why would he? She's deep down the rabbit hole of transphobia. You can't expect everyone to know that. So people thought, oh god, you know, is Stephen King in agreement? Is he also transphobic? And J.K. Rowling clearly thought so, because she wrote this tweet about how wonderful he was and how brilliant it was that he was standing up for real women and, you know, all that kind of thing. Poor Stephen King. This guy, he was asked, you know, are you aware that this is really transphobic? And all this guy put was, yes, trans women are women. Like, a simple statement. J.K. Rowling then deleted her tweet in praise of him and blocked him. Yeah, so people saying she's not transphobic, she's blocking people for saying trans women are women at this point. I mean, it's dangerous. And, oh, another one. Graham Linehan, known as Glinner on Twitter, was, thankfully, his account was got rid of. He was sent away from Twitter. And quite hilariously, he immediately went to Mumsnet. So he's been arguing for all this time about, oh, you know, women-only spaces and, you know, the sanctity of that, and deciding that based on sex, for example. And then he gets kicked off Twitter and immediately goes to Mumsnet. Anyway, very, very bizarre. I do worry about him a little bit, because I kind of feel like, particularly reading his stuff, I think he's not particularly well. I do think that he's kind of maybe attached, almost like, I think a lot of people are kind of quite radicalised by anti-trans stuff, really. But I think especially him, he shows me signs of somebody that, you know, is not particularly well and has kind of found maybe friendship and a sense of belonging within it. You know, it is a weird sense of acceptance maybe for him. I don't know. You know, the harm that man has been doing on Twitter has been really bad. It's been really, really bad. And thankfully they are gone now. Glinner is gone. I don't know what's going to happen with J.K. Rowling. I mean, it just baffles me and upsets me so much that somebody would spend, you know, their time trying to attack trans people like that. And they say, oh, you know, she's just stating her opinion. Well, if she's just stating her opinion, then why is she acting like, you know, peddling the ideas that trans people are predators and that trans women are secretly trying to assault real women in changing rooms? And these people always think they speak for all women. Well, I'm a cis woman, and I have no fear of trans women. Like, trans women are women, We all have differences as women, you know. I don't get it. I just really, really, truly don't get it. You know, and all this stuff about, oh, you know, if trans women are allowed to say they're women and go into to female spaces, it's going to be so dangerous. You know, what if they, like, you'll have men disguising themselves as women and walking in. Someone pointed out earlier, like, what's to stop a criminal doing that anyway? If a cis man wants to assault a woman, they're not doing things legally anyway, are they? They're not going to go through the trouble of, you know, disguising themselves as a woman. They could disguise themselves as a caretaker, as a janitor, as a cleaner, as anything. Like, it's just so transparent and bad. This video began talking about Matt Lucas, and it has moved. I guess it's just a sort of roundup video now. I don't know. But yeah, this wasn't supposed to be a proper video. This was supposed to just just supposed to be me getting some thoughts down and then making a proper one, but here I am, friends. I was ill quite recently, by the way, in case anyone wonders where I was. I got tested for COVID. Thankfully, I was negative, so I think it was just like a bad flu sort of thing. Yeah, did a COVID test. You have to put it right up your nose, which is very unpleasant. Okay, I love you loads. I'll go now. Okay, I love you loads. I'll see you really soon. And yeah, be safe, be well. Love you. Bye.